Hi, everybody. I want to give you a review for the final exam, our third exam. And so I'm just going to look at my review topics sheet and then go down giving a brief explanation of all the topics that I expect to be on the exam. So let's start off with Thomas Nagel on why is death bad. I would point out that when Thomas Nagel discusses this, he differentiates death from dying, right? The process of dying. Which can be painful and can involve bleeding. He also separates it from having an afterlife, like just having a second life somewhere else. So death here is, why is ceasing to exist bad? And in particular, why is it bad for the person who's ceasing to exist? Now, you can think of a couple of reasons why you might not think ceasing to exist is bad. One, you might think that once you've ceased to exist, you're not there to suffer any badness. This is that line, when death is here, I am not. When I am here, death is not. So how can we not get along? How can it hurt me? Good. That's one way of arguing that death is not bad. Another way of arguing that death is not bad is that it can't be experienced. Right? It's not that death is painful or boring. It's not that I find not existing unpleasant. Now, Nagel does think death is bad. And he argues that it's not bad because it's unpleasant or because of what it's like, but because of what it deprives you of. When you're dead, you're missing out on life. The goodness of life, it's the positive features of life that death deprives you of, which makes death bad for you. So it's a deprivation. It's like a hole in a bucket, right? A hole in the bucket is an absence, and yet it can still drain your bucket, right? It's still a bad thing to have in your bucket. Death is an absence. And it's bad because of what it prevents you from having, which is, there's lots of ways you can undermine me carrying out my projects, spending time with my friends, enjoying life, getting to walk on the seaside. You can break my legs, you can lock me in a room, and you can, of course, kill me, which would be one good way of preventing me from being able to do all the things that make me happy and that I value and completing my projects. Now, that doesn't solve the problem of the fact that you don't exist anymore. And so who is this bad for if that person doesn't exist anymore? But, you might look at different accounts of time, right? The presentist version of time where it says the only thing that exists is the present. Then I think you'd have a problem because you don't exist anymore when you're dead. But on other accounts of time, the past does exist. It's just not present, right? Dinosaurs, there are facts about dinosaurs. And they're true because of the thing in the past that's still there, exists in the past, which is different from something that's never existed, right? I did not have a kid when I was 20 years old. That is not that child I would have had when I was 20 doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in the past, doesn't exist in the future, doesn't exist at all. And I think the claim is when someone dies or ceases to exist, it just means that they're no longer included in the present, but they're still a part of reality. They're just a part of the past. So Nagel can give that sort of account and say that back there, it's bad for them. I also give the example of like the winning goal in a game, right? When the goal is scored, it's scored by a particular player at a particular minute of the game. Against a certain opponent, but it's not the winning goal until the game ends. Right? So it seems like events that happen after something can still change the quality of the thing in the past. So maybe your life can be made worse. You can be deprived, even though you don't exist anymore. In the present, anyway. It seems like you might still exist in the past. Okay. Real quickly, what else does Nagel point out? He also points out about this asymmetry. Like, how can ceasing to exist, not existing in the future, be a problem, given that we don't equally complain about not existing in the past, right? There are two periods in which I will not exist. One was before I was born, and the other one is after I die. Why is it that we're so upset about the one after I live? That we're saying that that's bad for a person. If we don't also think the period of non-existence before you were born was bad for you. He doesn't think that, he agrees that the period of non-existence before, we existed. He doesn't seem to think that the period before and one thing he could say is the period before we were born is bad for us and equally bad because we're missing out on life before we were born. But he doesn't want to say that. He wants to agree with common sense that not existing after we die is a problem, but not existing before we were born isn't a problem. And I think he makes this argument that Andrew Fife could exist longer if I lived an extra year or 10 years, that would still be me, and I'd have a longer life. I'd miss out on less. If you change my origin, if you move my birthday a year back or 10 years back, it's just no longer me anymore, right? You can't screw sometimes philosophers call this like the doctrine of the necessity of origins. Saul Kripke gives a famous argument for this, but the idea is that, my parents could have had a different kid if they gave birth to somebody a year earlier, but it wouldn't be me. So you can't miss out on the times before you were born, because I guess other than not having a time machine, but you can't move your birthday backwards and still be the same person is the claim. But you can move your death day back or forward, or and it'd still be the same person. Okay, so that's Thomas Nagel on death. I hope that you review some more material about him. Think about what sort of objections you might raise to Nagel, what sort of responses he could give. How does this connect to Robert Nozick and the experience machine, which is something we talked about earlier when we were talking about theories of welfare in the semester. Moving on to personal identity, right? So we talked about what makes you the same person over time. Well, we started with the Ship of Theseus, right? What makes the ship the same over time, even though its parts are being replaced? And there's sort of two main accounts we looked at, right? One was that, like, the minute you change any part, it's immediately a new ship. Another possible account is something like, as long as you're replacing the pieces one by one, slowly, there's some sort of psychological or physical continuity with the ship. It remains the same ship even after you've replaced all the same parts. But these are questions of identity, and in particular, the identity of a physical object. But then there's the question of, like, what are we? Are we a physical? Like, how do you talk about my persistence over time? What are my persistence conditions? What sort of changes can I undergo and still be the same person? We already looked at Nagel. Nagel sort of mentioned that you couldn't change my birthday and still have the same person, but you can change when they go out of existence and still have the same person, right? Maybe. But in particular, what we're interested in this discussion was how much I can change and still remain the same person. So my cells are constantly dying and being replaced. That's why I have to eat to nourish myself, to regenerate cells that are dying. And that's why you get cancer, right? It's replacing cells. It's a photocopier replacing dying cells. And sometimes there's a copying error, which produces a cell that grows out of control and kills you. That's what cancer is. That's why it's bad to, smoke. It kills the cells in your lungs, irritates them, and so that they have to be replaced more often, and then that can so that increases the chances of a copying error, so it increases the chance of cancer. Good. So physically, I'm very different from my infant self. And this, going back to the sperm that came into my father, to the fertilized egg, to the infant, right? These are all, by now, I'm made of different stuff than that little infant. And maybe when I die in 90 years, I'll be made of different stuff with my parts steadily being replaced. What makes me the same person over time? I mean, one thing you could say is I'm a different person at every moment, and as a truth about reality. But really, for political reasons, for legal reasons, we don't treat you like we just invent the fiction that you stay the same, even though your parts are changing. Or you could say, no, it's true. I am staying the same person. What matters is that my physical parts need to be replaced slowly, right? There needs to be some sort of continuity over time of this physical object that's keeping its parts mostly the same and just swapping out parts slowly. There is, while I might be made of totally new parts than the embryo that became me, but the parts got swapped out slowly until it eventually became me. Alternatively, you might say, listen, I'm not a physical being, right? I'm a psychological being. I'm a consciousness. I'm a set of beliefs and values and ideas and personality traits and decisions and plans. And so it doesn't matter if my parts get swapped out slowly or quickly, right? As long as up here stays the same, right? And by here, I don't mean my physical brain. I mean the thought. So you could scan my brain and replace it, be like, okay, I'm going to scan his brain and replace it with a silicone duplicate so that he can live longer all at once. On this account, I would say that's still the same person, even though you kind of swapped out things really quickly, because physical continuity doesn't matter. It's just psychological continuity. And by psychological continuity, I mean, not only do I physically change over time, I also psychologically change over time, right? Infant Fife is very different from current Fife, and current Fife is very different from 80-year-old Fife, right? Different beliefs, different ideas, different plans, different values, different memories. But, even though I'm changing over time, even psychologically, you might say, well, you stay the same psychological being as long as the changes are gradual, right? I might change some deep, important feature of my psychology, but the other ones stayed the same, and then the other ones a little bit later changed. You might also say that there needs to be an essential core of your psychology. It's not like what you've decided to have for lunch today isn't actually an important part of your identity. I mean, it's not quite clear if you want to frame your psychological theory of personal identity in terms of the whole psychology, or just memories, or just some core essential psychological traits. And lastly, you could have an account that's a hybrid where you say, in order to persist over time, you need to maintain physical continuity and psychological continuity. So you can't have dramatic psychological changes and you can't have dramatic physical changes. We looked at a couple different thought experiments that challenged or illustrated the different positions having to do with personal identity. John Locke's The Prince and the Cobbler, Robert Nozick's The Teletransporter. Briefly, with John Locke's The Prince and the Cobbler, you have the psychology of the prince moved into the cobbler's body. The psychology of the cobbler moved into the prince's body. There's no physical exchange, right? There's nothing that moves from one to the other except for their personalities. I like to use the example of like a neurosurgeon, an evil neurosurgeon who scans the prince's brain and then goes over and rewires the cobbler's brain. So now when the cobbler's body wakes up, it has all the memories and personality of the prince. And then he also scans the cobbler's brain and goes over and rewires the brain in the prince's body, so that when that body wakes up, it has all the memories and thoughts and beliefs and values and attitudes and personality traits of the cobbler. So, at the end of the story, right, the question is, where is the prince and where is the cobbler? Did the prince's identity, did the prince stay with the body, or did he go with the psychology, or did the prince die? Where's the cobbler at the end of the story? Is it in the prince's body? Is the cobbler still with the cobbler's body, or did the cobbler die? Right? John Locke's using that because he thinks that it goes with your psychology. He's trying to use that as a way of arguing that we're not our physical beings, we're instead a set of psychological traits. That needs to remain psychologically continuous in order to be the same person. Robert Nozick gives another sort of thought experiment to illustrate these points. He talks about, what if we build this sort of form of transportation and it becomes very ubiquitous? You imagine a society where you can make your way to Mars, or go visit your mom, in a faraway city, or visit a country on the other side of the planet by walking into this sort of teletransporter that produces a perfect scan of your body and your brain. But in the process of doing the scan, it has to disassemble you, right? Disintegrate you. And then on some other platform far away where you want to go, it reassembles you, right? From different matter. So, there's a body that walks into one transporter bay, and then it gets disintegrated. And then on another transporter bay far away, a body gets assembled, and the last thing it remembers is walking into a teletransporter in the previous location with all the same beliefs, memories, attitudes as it had before, right? The question is, can you survive that? It seems like on John Locke's account, there's psychological continuity, right? Your physical parts all got swapped out, right? The physical parts over here, new physical parts over there. But, you have the same beliefs, you have the same memories, you have the same, whatever changes, psychological changes, they're tiny. So there is a psychological continuity between the person who enters the teletransporter and the person who exits it. So Robert Nozick, if you take there to be a physical criterion of personal identity, if you think that physical continuity is what matters, the teletransporter is a murder machine. It murders one person and produces a clone somewhere else. If you take a psychological continuity view, it's what is called. It's a teletransporter. It takes one person and moves them somewhere else. If you have a hybrid view, which requires both physical and psychological continuity, well, there isn't physical continuity, so that would be a murder machine again. Good. What about, and so that's the issue of personal identity. I mean, one of the reasons why it's important to talk about that is to say, what is it that's important about us? Because I'm going to talk about animal welfare next, right? Am I just a physical object? Am I my psychology? Am I actually a higher order conscissness? When did I start existing? When do I stop existing? Of course, that's relevant for abortion. It's relevant to figure out what's important about us and what makes me, so we can figure out why it's so wrong to kill a human person instead of, a mouse. Like, what makes us special? I presume I have different identity conditions than a mouse, just like I have different identity conditions than a Ship of Theseus, a physical object. Probably has something to do with the different type of being I am. Okay, let's move on to animal welfare. So here we talked about Peter Singer. And Peter Singer talks about how, he asks, in what sense are all human beings equal? Right? Why do we think sexism is wrong and racism is wrong? Is it that everyone's of equal strength? That everyone's of equal intelligence? He says, on any measure you choose, humans are not equal. There might even be populations on islands or in certain places in the world that just are universally, are worst on all of these traits. Worse at math, worse at strength, worse at intelligence, worse at, where. But that doesn't mean they're not equal in the sense that we mean all humans are equal when we're saying racists are wrong and sexists are wrong. The sense in which they're all equal is that they all deserve equal consideration. Their interests are equal to ours and deserve equal consideration to ours. All human beings, their interests count equally when I'm deciding on doing an action, right? Curing a disease, spending money to build a road, deciding which drug to spend money on studying to help people. All human beings have an interest in living, and they all count. I shouldn't say, these ones, because of these traits, they only count as half versus these humans who I think their interest in living counts more or something like that, right? He thinks all humans have an equal interest or deserve to have their interests counted equally. Good. I mean, that doesn't mean that you might say, well, I'm going to save these 30 people instead of these 60 because these 30 people are younger and have 3 times as much time to live, and these 60 people are all near their death, right? But I'm counting their interests equally. That you might say that, some people have a less of an interest in having to survive than the other one, than the people who have longer to live. They have less to lose than the younger people. So, I mean, it's not saying that you have to treat everyone exactly the same way. But the way I treat them needs to be a reflection of the fact that I'm treating all of their interests equally. Now, what does it mean to have an interest? Who has interests? He doesn't think rocks have an interest. Rocks don't care if you break them or not, if they go into the ocean or if they're put into a tree, right? So whatever happens to a rock, it doesn't have an interest in what happens to it. There's no way to affect a rock's welfare. It doesn't have a welfare. Nothing's good or bad for it. He actually thinks the same is true of plants and trees. He thinks in order to have a welfare, in order for something to be good or bad for you, what you need is the ability to feel pleasure and the ability to feel pain. Right? Once you have one way in which the future can unfold can involve a lot of suffering for you. You have an interest in that not happening. You have an interest in the universe unfolding a different way, where you end up with pleasure and less suffering. Right? So it's just humans and animals, right? Animals that can feel pain, that have interests. So then he says, well, given that all human interests need to be weighed similarly, he thinks that any being with interests need to have their interests treated equally. That just like racism and sexism is wrong, because we're not treating something with interests and that treating their interests equally, so is speciesism. Right? Arbitrarily saying, well, just because these people have purple skin or they're not as good at math or their gender, I don't count their interests as equal to some other group of humans. That's wrong. That's sexism. That's racism. He thinks also the same sort of thing when I say, well, they're not humans. They don't have the right DNA or they don't have a heart and lungs where we do. Therefore, I'm not counting their interests as equal to mine. That's also, he thinks, making the same mistake that the racists and the sexists make, and he introduces this term speciesism. Now, I think he still wants to say we should prefer saving the life of one adult human over the life of 2 cows. He's going to have to give an account of why cows have less of an interest in surviving to the future than the human does. The human has more to lose. So I am weighing their interests equally. It's just that they have less of an interest. Kind of like you can either stab me in the leg or you can give 2 people a paper cut. Right? Well, there's 2 people over there that are doing something too, but they have a less of an interest in avoiding a paper cut than I have an interest in not being stabbed in the leg. So you might save me from my injury instead of saving 2 people from injuries. Just like you might save 1 younger person over 2 people on the verge of death, right? The 2 people on the verge of death have less of an interest in continuing because they have less to lose, whereas the young person has much more to lose. So you have to say something about how the cows have less to lose by dying than the human does, but so that I'm weighing their interests equally, but there's something the cow just has less of a concern for the future, less to lose than the human does. Yeah. Okay, good. So then we talked about, and this also we should think about when we talk about animal welfare, right? What makes humans special? I mean, why does the human have more to lose? I suspect something about long-term planning. I'm living this autonomous life that, like, I'm deciding what sort of life to live. I could be scared of death. I affect my community when I die. I'm living an autonomous life, whereas an animal is just being driven around by their instincts of the moment. Something, I don't know what sort of things he wants to say. I mean, he's going to say that, one way to put it is, I don't know if Singer really needs to say that there are some sort of special sort of interest or sort of life that a human can live that a cow can't. That gives humans more of an interest in staying in existence than a cow. Okay. Which kind of connects up to abortion, which is the next topic we talked about, right? So with abortion, we first started with J.J. Thomson. J.J. Thomson says, well, let's just say the fetus is a person, has a full right to life. What is personhood? We can set that aside. But it's whatever makes it wrong to kill a middle-aged, normally functioning human being. Whatever makes it particularly wrong to kill them instead of, a mouse or a tree. And so let's say a fetus does have that. If it does have that, she still says, well, listen, it doesn't necessarily mean that all abortions are immoral or murder, because sometimes it's okay to kill a middle-aged adult human who has a right to life. So let's think about the cases where it's okay to kill a middle-aged adult, and then we can talk about what cases it would be okay to kill a fetus who might also have a right to life. The middle-aged adult definitely has a right to life. So let's assume the fetus has a right to life. It's still going to be okay to kill the fetus in the same situations it's okay to kill the adult. So she talks about this violinist case, right? The famous violinist. You wake up in the hospital. You've been plugged into this violinist who needs your body, you to be connected to them and stay in the hospital for a year to keep the violinist alive. And if you unplug and leave, he'll die. She says, are you morally obligated to stay and keep the violinist alive? Does he have a right to use your body? Does his right to life mean he has a right to use your body to stay alive? Do you have an obligation? Does his right to life give you an obligation to keep him alive? Oddly enough, Peter Singer, I think, would say yes. We can talk about Peter Singer here. Thomson says no. Maybe if you put the violinist in his situation where he needs your body, then yes. But she thinks, no, I mean, if you don't know the violinist and he just needs your body, it would be nice of you. It would be supererogatory, moral extra credit. Good to do, but not bad not to do for you to stay. But it's not murder for you to unplug and leave. You don't owe it to the violinist to let him use your body to stay alive. So then she says, similarly, for abortion, even if the fetus is a person, even if it has a right to life, which she's not granting, but she's just saying, assuming it does, it would still be okay to have abortion in the cases of saving your own life, because she thinks you can kill an adult to save your own life. So the mother is in danger of dying if she brings the pregnancy to term. It'd be okay to have an abortion in a case where the pregnancy is the result of rape. That's like the violinist who needs your body, the fetus needs your body. You had nothing to do with them needing your body to survive, so you don't owe them anything. And then lastly, most controversially, she says in the cases of failed contraception. She thinks that if you get pregnant because the condom fails, that's actually not on you, right? That's the world, the freak accident at the factory is the reason you got pregnant, not because of you. You could say well, it is because of you. You had sex. And she says, you can't expect people to cut sex out of their life, just like you can't expect people to stay as hermits in their house in order to avoid the risk of, killing someone by playing baseball or driving a car, or all the sorts of activities that we engage in very, responsible ways that are necessary for living life, and do put people at risk, but such small risks, and to avoid those risks would require such an extreme sacrifice on everybody's part that would make human lives not worth living. So like a reasonable expectation of people, is not to be put at risk by drag racing or leaving gun down in the street, or I don't know what else, drunk driving. But it's unreasonable for us to expect you to stay home and never leave your house in order not to put people at other risks. And similarly, she thinks that cutting sex out of your life is even when you can use contraception to reduce the risks to a negligible degree of getting pregnant, that is too much to expect of people. And she also thinks that if you go down that route where you expect women to do that in order to avoid responsibility for any pregnancy that's the result of sex, she's going to say, well, then you're going to actually go down the route of ending up blaming women for rape too, because why did you go to a mixed sex college? Why were you out at night without an escort? Why did you get a hysterectomy to make sure that no one could ever impregnate you against your will? Like she's like, there's down that road leads a slippery slope to very, I think she thinks, absurd views. Okay, so then we look at Marianne Warren on abortion. Marianne Warren says, okay, the earlier discussion we had with Thompson assumed that she said, okay, we're creating that the fetus is a person and has a right to life. Marianne Warren wants to question that assumption. She wants to say, no, the fetus is not a person. What's wrong about killing an adult, a human, as opposed to a mouse or a cow or a tree, cutting down a tree, is that they have personhood. They have self-awareness, a sense of ability to reason, ability to plan, to decide their own life, right? She said there's some sort of higher order consciousness, some sort of thing that humans have that mice don't have and trees don't have, that makes it so wrong to kill a human. It's not just that it's not the specious reason that we're just have human DNA, but it's some trait that we might share with some intelligent alien race we haven't met. We might share with the greater apes like chimpanzees. We presume if God exists, we would share with God and angels. Like, they're people who have goals and can talk and can think and are aware of themselves, right? This sort of higher order traits that make it so wrong to kill an adult, normally functioning human being, person. And fetuses and embryos don't have that, right? Embryos are more like bacteria, like a microscopic reproductive set of cells that you can put in a petri dish. It doesn't have the things that make it so wrong to kill a middle-aged, normally functioning human being. So it's not wrong to have an abortion. They're not persons. They don't have a right to life. The problem with, maybe the problem, but the worry about Marianne Warren's position is that it seems to not just defend abortion, in fact, at any point in the pregnancy, but also infanticide, right? Because infants also don't seem to have these personhood traits. It doesn't seem to show up. There doesn't seem to be much differentiation between an infant at 1 week and a fully grown horse, right? A fully grown horse is much more self-aware and conscious and et cetera and communicable, like, and engaged in some sort of back and forth with a fully grown horse, much more than I can with an infant at 1 week. So like these special traits that maybe make humans special don't seem to arise until 2 years old. So it seems like maybe Marianne Warren's committed to saying abortion's okay, but so is infanticide. You might wonder what sort of responses she could give. Can she avoid this result? Maybe she should just embrace it and say, yes, it's fine. Good. And then let's look at the last person we looked at on abortion was Don Marquis, or Marquis, or Marcus. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his last name. And he says, you know what? Marianne Warren, I agree. The fetus is not a person. You're right, it doesn't have those special traits, but it will. And that actually makes it just as wrong to kill the fetus as it does to kill a person. Why? Well, let's think about why it's wrong to kill a person. Is it because it's wrong because you're destroying a holy object, something that's like, there's something that shouldn't be destroyed because it's a special thing in the universe? No. it's because you're depriving a person gets to live a life of a particular high quality, right? You get to choose your own life. You get to be autonomous. You get to choose your own goals, to make long-term goals and pursue them against your strongest. It has a very special sort of life that the traits that make up personhood enable you to live, which I'm depriving you of when I kill you in the middle of you've already lived a little bit of it when you're in middle age and a person, but you still have more of it in front of you. But I'm stealing that from you when I kill you. And so he thinks similarly, you're doing that to a fetus when you abort it. You're stealing it of its future time as a person. It's not a person. It doesn't have those traits yet. It's not living that sort of life yet, but it has it in its future. Now you might wonder, well, what does this also apply to sperm or unfertilized eggs? Does it mean I have an obligation not to use birth control? Does it mean I have an obligation to reproduce as much as possible, so I'm not depriving sperm and eggs of their future times as persons? I think no, I don't think we were ever a sperm. I don't think we were an egg. I also think there's maybe a worry here that Marquis, you could object, I was never an embryo, right? That's still just a precursor to me, just like the sperm was a precursor to me. You might say you're not really existing until 24 weeks into pregnancy when the consciousness shows up. Or maybe you think you don't exist until you're a person, like you're a person fundamentally, and there was never a time before being a person you existed, in which case Marquis's argument's not going to work at all. Okay, great. And then lastly, we looked at moral nihilism, right? The idea that no moral claims are true, or that we don't know any moral claims. And in particular, I looked at moral error theory, J.L. Mackey's error theory. Error theory argues that all moral claims are not true because they're all false. Turns out they're trying to say something about the world, and they get it wrong. All these claims about murder is wrong, it's right to help people, it's supererogatory to do charity, right, blah, blah, blah. All the theories we've been talking about, it's like you took a class on witches, and it turns out witches don't exist. Now, why does Mackey think that that's true? He thinks that moral claims are weird sorts of moral facts are weird sorts of facts. They're about these moral properties, which are weird moral properties somehow call upon us to behave a certain way, demands the world to be a certain way. It doesn't describe the way the world is right now, it says the way the world should be. I think Mackey has this sort of atoms in the void view of the world, like it's just matter and empty space, and then you try to add this like weird queer, by queer he means like odd feature to reality, which is shouldness or goodness, and you think the universe is just a bunch of physical objects arranged in empty space. And from that view, it does seem like moral claims are kind of utterly unlike. They don't have locations in time and space, right? They don't have a mass. They don't have electrical charge. They do seem peculiar. But, I think Mackey's view of reality is a little odd, right? He doesn't have natural laws. He doesn't have gravity, right? Seems like gravity is weird too. Gravity doesn't have a location in space, or electromagnetism doesn't have a weight. Maybe they're forces. They govern physical objects. They tell the universe how to be, and then they enforce that command. Now, morality is kind of weird that it tells the universe how to be, but it relies on us learning about it, like a self-aware being to learn about it, for them to enforce it. But now it doesn't seem so weird. And also math, right? Mackey doesn't have a place for mathematical truths, which are not, I can't destroy the number 2. It doesn't have a place and location in space and time. It doesn't have a weight. But there are truths about numbers and mathematical truths. And I get to them by reasoning as opposed to doing experiments, right? A priori. So now I've got numbers and I've got natural laws in addition to physical objects and empty space. But then there's other things. Well, space and time is weird, of course. But what else? We have properties, right? Matter isn't all distinct. Every bit of matter isn't totally unlike every other piece of matter. They share traits in common. Shapes, colors, masses. So now there's traits, which, abstract traits that exist that Mackey needs to allow for. I think possibilities also, right? It's possible that I could wear a yellow shirt instead of this shirt, but I can't wear a shirt that's both yellow and green all over. That possibility doesn't exist. So there's truths about what possibilities exist and which ones don't exist. But of course, none of them are in the actual world. Right? There are possible ways the world could have been. So there's truths about possibility. But I'm just saying, once Mackey starts thinking, if we don't accept Mackey's premise that the universe is so Spartan and just has 2 simple categories of thing, matter and empty space, and we start thinking about all the things that a true description of reality talks about, natural laws, mathematical truths, possibilities, properties, traits, like shared traits, shareable traits. Now, once you throw in moral properties, it doesn't seem so weird. Good. And then there's other arguments against, moral error theory, right? That it's self-defeating. If I say that there is no such thing about what you should or shouldn't do, and that's what Mackey finds so weird, and I say, well, if you're so, puzzled by the idea of shouldness being a part of the universe, and the idea that actions could be justified or unjustified, then doesn't that also pose a problem for logic, which is another thing that maybe is a part of reality? Like that beliefs you should or shouldn't have, beliefs that are justified or unjustified. And then if you get rid of logic and just justifications and beliefs and the idea that there are beliefs you should or shouldn't have, then how is the moral nihilist able to make their argument for moral nihilism in the first place? I think also there's a good argument. I always think that there's like a Pascal wager kind of alternative way to get around that moral nihilism, where you say something like, if moral nihilism is true, nothing matters, including what I'm doing. But if moral nihilism is false, what I'm doing does matter. And it does matter that you cheat on your girlfriend or steal from someone or murder people. And so you should not do those things on the chance that moral nihilism is false. Because if moral nihilism is true, nothing matters. And if moral nihilism is false, something does matter. So that's the only way in which you might, what I want to say here, the safe bet, even if you're really sure of moral nihilism, is to act as if it's not. I always think that that's a good argument against nihilism as well. Other way to argue it's moral nihilism is just give an argument for utilitarianism, give an argument for Kantianism, give an argument for virtue ethics. Once you prove one of them is correct, then by extension, moral nihilism would be incorrect. You say, like, listen, I've experienced happiness. It has the trait of goodness. I don't buy your argument, nihilist. Or I buy the Kantian argument that free will, when I value my own choices, I'm committed to the value of other free wills. You defend one of these other arguments, then you, by proving a moral theory true, you've disproved the claim that all moral nihilists claim that all moral theories are false. Okay, well that's a very quick overview of the topics we've discussed since the last exam. I am not sure if this covers everything I might ask a question about, but I think it covers all the big things. I encourage you to go back and relook at Don Marquis and Marianne Warren and Moral Nihilism and Peter Singer on animal welfare and J.J. Thompson and the reading we had on personal identity and Nagel on debt. And good luck. It's been great. Sorry to lose you guys, but you have to go on to bigger and better things and maybe learn philosophy from someone else. I'm jealous. All right, take care.